Okay, for this interview for the archives, we have Aline Wolf, the author of many books, the founder of one of the first Montessori schools in the country. And on her lap is Nurturing the Spirit, her take on spirituality in Montessori schools. There it is, there's the picture, right? And Catherine Maresca, who's on the board of Christian Family School in Washington, D.C.
Can I fix that up?
Please.
I'm a founding parent of Christian Family Montessori School
Okay.
and on the staff, but not on the board. And I'm on the staff as a catechist doing religious education in a Montessori model.
Okay. And what we're really trying to do here is explore this idea of spirituality in Montessori schools and beyond in religious education and so on. So maybe can I ask each of you, since you know each other's position fairly well, what is the difference between your two takes on spirituality and Montessori education? Aline, would you?
First of all, I guess I should say that Catherine is our daughter. And it's really an honor, and it's fun to be here with her to discuss this. I had explored the idea of spirituality in Montessori schools, well, I guess it was about 15 years ago. And I felt that it didn't have the recognition that it should have. According to her writings, she used the word spirit many times and talked about the spiritual growth of children. And I wanted to reawaken this sense with the teachers so that they wouldn't be afraid to approach the idea of nurturing the spirit. And I felt that to do this, they had to understand the difference between religion and spirituality, because most of the Montessori schools are non-sectarian, and they don't teach religion because that's the opportunity of the parents. So I wanted to make this clear, that it was a different thing. I like to think of spirituality as asking the big questions, and religion offers various answers.
Okay. And can I just ask, you're not suggesting that religion should not be part of Montessori schools, are you? You're just saying that some schools don't take a sectarian approach?
That's right. I think if a school is founded as a religious school, it could be a Christian school, a Jewish school, or whatever, then it's appropriate to teach religion there. But if it's a non-sectarian school where there's a variety of religions represented in the staff and in the children, then I think you can't emphasize one religion over another.
Okay. Well, Catherine, I think you built on your mother's strong foundation here and came down on the side of standing for something here. What's your take?
Well, I totally agree with everything Mom said, but in the school that we started, it was started by a group of Christians. We're Catholic. And we have a school called Christian Family Montessori School, and part of the program is the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, which introduces Christianity in a Montessori model. We have children from many Christian denominations in the school and occasionally from other faiths. And whether or not, if they come to our school, regardless of what their faith is, then that's part of the program they receive. So we are about nurturing the spirit of the child, but of course the way we do that is specific to Christianity. How's that for a start?
Okay, well, that's
your turn.
Okay, let's see where we can. And the idea is to get you two to kind of jump out of your chairs and go at each other.
Wrangle? I want to talk about allowances then.
Okay, well, let's talk about sort of the run-of-the-mill Montessori school in this country, the non-sectarian school. The advice you gave in nurturing the spirit, and you've been giving otherwise, is how do you approach the committed parent of faith, or the person who wants to push harder for one of the sets of answers to spiritual questions?
Well, I think if a parent comes to our school, we have Panamon Academy, which is a non-sectarian school. And if someone comes and they want specifically religious instruction, we have to tell them that they can get that somewhere else because we don't give a specific religion. But we do try to nourish the spirit that is within every child. You know, I think that spirituality is much older than the religions. It really goes back to the beginning of civilization because every culture was known as had some kind of spiritual expression. Religion came into being much later, the formalized religions, and came up with answers or ways to express the spirituality. So we feel that we want to nourish the individual spirituality within each child by helping them to nourish their awe and wonder, to feel oneness with nature. You know, in Montessori and her cosmic education shows that we all came from the same original Big Bang. And in a sense, we're all related. We're all related to the animals, to the different, everything in nature. And therefore, we have to realize that if we hurt something in nature, or we hurt each other, we're hurting ourselves in a way because we're all related spiritually.
Okay. How do you respond to that?
I would respond to that in the non-sectarian setting. It's important, I think, with the 3 to 6-year-old children to nurture the spirit in the way that Mom describes. I think when you get to the elementary level, where children are beginning to explore culture, and religion has been a part of every culture, they get an introduction to the gods of the Romans and the Greek mythology and so on, but people pull back when you approach modern history and religions in play at this time. And all of a sudden they're like, well, let's not talk about that.
Yeah, the Greeks are okay.
The Greeks are okay because those gods aren't really honored anymore. And yet, religions are still a major part of every culture, a major part of all of our world citizenship issues. And if children are ignorant of religions, and their next door neighbor, is having a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah, and they're going, to the mosque and so on, there's an opportunity there for understanding or an opportunity there for alienation. And I think if Montessori schools can begin to incorporate an introduction, instead of pulling back to really get into, what do you believe? What do other people believe? How do other cultures? What's the main religion of this culture or that culture? And get a little taste of those traditions and get familiar with the vocabulary of those traditions, everyone would benefit, regardless of the faith of the individual children.
Okay. How do you respond to the idea of not holding back knowledge of religious traditions?
Well, I really agree with the idea that children should study all the different religions in order to have a respect for others, because the world is full of all different kinds of faith. And we have, in order to respect it, we have to know something about it. Why are these people doing it this way and not that way, and so on. I think that that's very important because religions have historically been divisive in the world. The big trouble spots in the world: Northern Ireland, the Catholics and Protestants, the Bosnia, the Iraq, the Sunnis, and the Shiites. Religion has been divisive, and it shouldn't be that way. And I think unless we study it and understand it and have the children know what's going on, then they can develop more respect, particularly if they can meet people from other religions and know them, as friends. I grew up Catholic, and we didn't interact much with the other faiths. We lost that richness of other religions, and I want to see that children do understand and respect the others.
Do you think your principles lead to that sort of segregation of religions?
No.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Well, in my experience with the children in our school, where I've been the catechist of children from ages 3 to 12, is that in the early years, what we offer them in terms of religious formation is very much about their relationship with God. And then, we use the symbols of Christianity. There are symbols in every tradition that give children access in some way to the divine. And they love those symbols and enjoy them. And then, again, in the elementary, where their minds are going kind of horizontally rather than vertically, they become interested in the community that they've been introduced to. So how does our community pray at church? How can I be part of that? How big is it? Does it cover the world? And so on. And so they're more communal in both their prayer and their interest. And then around age 9, they kind of put their heads up and say, whoa, not everybody in the world believes the way that Christians believe. And what do the Jews believe and what do the Muslims believe? And they're very, very interested in this. And so we could call it a sensitive period for religions. And this is a sensitive period I think I would like to see Montessori schools take advantage of. One of the things that people are comfortable doing, if they're going to touch on religion in their schools, is introducing the vocabulary. This is the mosque, this is the imam, this is the Quran. Give the words. And what I would like to see is a little bit of a deeper introduction using the signs of the tradition. So, for example, in Islam, the people pray, and part of their prayer is to kneel on the floor and touch the floor with their head and their hands and their knees and their feet. And this is a gesture of submission. And this is a very important gesture in Islam. And Islam means to submit. And so if they get on the floor and feel that gesture and realize that devout Muslims might do that gesture 45 times a day, they begin to get a better feel for the religion than you could get from saying the word mosque, imam, and Quran. And so I'd like to get those signs out and to be part of the experience of interfaith education.
You think there's room for that sort of curriculum in non-sectarian Montessori schools?
Oh, I do. I think non-sectarian means that you're not emphasizing one religion over another, but to study them historically and to study their signs, as Catherine said, I think it's very appropriate.
Okay. Would you see a kind of a community of schools that you could work with an imam and a rabbi and who knows?
Wouldn't that be wonderful? I'd love to see that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think in the United States, there's been a sense of religion as being sidelined and not too important, and that history is moving towards a time when there would be no religion. And when we encountered, maybe 9/11 was a turning point, going to war in the Middle East, people realized how important religion was and how ignorant we were. The United States sent over cultural people who knew the movies of Iraq, but not the faith,
Okay.
and they were so ignorant. So how can we get away from that?
Well, how would you see approaching that then in a fairly small traditional Montessori school? Would they start with elementary or upper elementary units that would build on organized spirituality, or what should be done?
Well, I think it could be. I don't see how you organize spirituality, but I guess you mean organized religion.
Religion, right.
Yeah, I think that could be done. When I talk about nurturing the spirit, I don't really talk about saying we're going to nurture our spirits every Tuesday at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
It's an ongoing thing, and it proceeds from the inner spirituality of the teacher who recognizes spiritual moments. And, like, for instance, watching the things in nature and experiencing the awe and wonder and asking questions. How did this happen? Where did this all come from, And so it takes advantage of those spiritual times. But then I think that there can be some courses that would explore all the religions. As Catherine said, I agree with that.
Okay. Okay, good.
I was going to say, one of my ongoing projects is to work on materials that would be appropriate for inclusion in Montessori classes or interfaith efforts for children about age 9 to 12. And so I'm trying to develop a set of materials for each of the major religions that would give the children a taste of that tradition, more than the vocabulary. What is the salat? What is the hajj? And so on, and go through the different traditions. So I think that if you can put materials on the shelf, that would be one, materials like that on the shelf, that would be one way to do it. Another thing you can do is children often do reports on the country. Have the teacher pay attention to what is the tradition or traditions, of faith in that country, and pay attention to the religious part of the report, not just, the exports and the imports and so on. So you can give attention to religion and just incorporate it into many parts of the school tradition or school curriculum.
Okay, can we talk a little bit about what the religious and spiritual environment in the United States is now? I hear more and more that young people are saying they're spiritual, but they're not religious. Is that an affirmation of what you're talking about, or is that a loss of something? Or
that
what?
was one of my concerns, because definitely the religion is losing many of its adherents. And in this country, the Hispanic people are Christian and are making up more and more of the people in the Christian tradition. I think that I lose my train of thought. She's much younger. Comes out with the right words. I think that I was concerned about, because when I went to school, I went to a Catholic school, and I was taught all the answers before I really had the questions. And we were taught what to do and everything. Well, then if you take that away from the schools, what do they have? And this is where I felt the spirituality could be nurtured in a way without making it all centered on one particular religious expression. And I think that's needed. I really do think people need to know that they have a spirituality, and that it's it really gives them roots and gives them a sense of being connected to the universe, of being connected to other people, and to be concerned for other people, and then that leads to the virtues of do unto others. I think that the spirituality fills that gap.
Okay. Thoughts in this country?
Lots. I'm also reading the same research about people leaving the churches, and what I'm hearing is that people are leaving the organizations. They're tired of the buildings, they're tired of the money, they're tired of the structures, but they're not tired of the faith. So they're not necessarily walking out on their faith, they're walking out on the organizations. And there are days when I'm ready to do that myself, so I totally can sympathize with that feeling. But there's no question in my mind that I would walk out of my faith. That feels firm in me. So I think we have to be careful when we say children are leaving religion, or people are leaving religion, that they're not necessarily leaving the faith in which they were raised, as much as the church that they were asked to be pledge allegiance to or whatever. Go ahead. I see you have a thought.
I was disagreeing with that a little bit, because I think some people are leaving the faith. They just don't believe all these things anymore, and they don't want to follow a lot of the things that the Pope and the bishops say you should do or shouldn't do. And they're believing more in things like gay marriage and
ordination of
Ordination
women
of
priests.
women.
See,
That's
all
a
that to
big
me
one.
is on the organizational level, you know, so. But yeah, there's some of both, but
Yeah,
I
there's
wouldn't
some
say
of
that
both.
everybody's walking away from their faith just because they've left an organization.
Yeah.
What I would say, though, is that I have compared being spiritual to something like being able to communicate with a language. You can't have a generic language. You have to have a specific language. And if I want to speak to you, I have to speak to you in a specific language. I can't just say I believe in language in general, you know. And I also feel like this is somewhat true of becoming spiritual or becoming in some way connected to the divine, that there's a language that's needed to do that, and the language is the language of signs. And every tradition has its signs. So it could be the prostration, it could be the light, it could be the bread and wine of the Eucharist, it could be the Torah. But these signs are needed, you know, to build that spiritual life. And without any of those signs, you have a very generic and not very well developed spirituality. It's harder to develop it without a specific sign.
Well, can I just interrupt you
Yeah,
and
sure.
ask you, I mean, you've sort of built a spirituality around nature,
I did,
Right.
yes, somewhat.
and does that meet Catherine's criteria here of?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think it's part of it, but she's talking about more specific signs that are in each religion.
Mhm.
And that would be the prayers, the rituals, the beliefs. And I think I look more to nature and to giving children a sense that what they do matters, that they have Montessori believed that every person had what she called a cosmic task, that they had something to do to make the world a little better. And this is something that I think ties in with the spiritual and should be emphasized more, because so many children and people now are interested in, you know, accumulating wealth and having power, possessions, and all this.
Mhm.
And they need to see their fellow citizens of the world and be concerned about them, and to feel that there's something in their life that they are called to do. That's the important part. And I think this gives children a purpose, a real purpose for their lives.
Is it a sign that they might speak about being my brother's keeper then?
That's sort of that way, yeah. But I think the common good. How many schools talk about the common good? I don't know. But I think that's something that is very important in the world today, especially for peace. I mean, we're going to war all the time, and that's certainly not for the common good.
Yeah. You want to comment on the common good in terms of religious differences?
I think that every religion speaks of the common good. And to find your deepest motivation for the common good probably would come out of that relationship with the divine, however you understand that, and the related relationship with all other people and the world. So there's a sense, I think, of learning right from wrong that's very strong around age 6 to 9. Kids are very interested in those questions of, can I lie, can I steal, what's wrong with those things? And then they figure that all out to their satisfaction and the questions of their age. And then there comes a deeper question, which is, what difference does it make if I pay attention, if I follow what I know to be the good or the bad? And the answer to what difference does it make can come in a very powerful way from the religious tradition that a child is rooted in. and may not come as powerful, but can come, from just a focus, for example, on nature. But
How about the common good? Can that be a basis for an ethical stand?
sure, and I think that if people come together, and this is very well shown in the Interfaith Youth Corps, which is focused on high school and college students, where they do service projects together, but part of the process is that they then bring to the table a conversation about the service project that they did. So suppose they work with homeless people, well then they would say, okay, come to the table with what your tradition teaches about serving the homeless, or serving the sojourner, or serving children, whatever. And then they have a conversation about what their traditions, and then they see that there is a strong concern for peace or for the common good and so on. But it's coming out with the strongest motivation, of those servants and the service work, rather than a more amorphous, oh, don't we all want the common good?
Okay.
Well, how do you account for people who have no religion but are deeply spiritual people who do a lot of good in the world?
I think that that's an option. I think there are religious ways to tap into the deepest part of ourselves, and there are non-religious ways to tap into it. Now, one of the images in my own head is sometimes we use this idea of climbing the mountain to a spiritual ascent, and there are some well-worn paths, right?
Right.
And then there's some people who've got to beat their way through the bushes, and they're welcome to it. And everything in between. And I would honor any ascent to that. It doesn't have to be religious, but certainly when you have a handle on how religions are working towards that ascent, you've got a handle on a lot of what's going on in the world and the spiritual life of people.
Okay. Well, before we started, I talked with Catherine about asking you two to speculate a little bit on Montessori's take on this. That it seemed fairly early in her career, she began working around Catholic themes.
She did. She was a Catholic and living in a Catholic country. Italy was predominantly Catholic. And I think that was her frame of reference for when she often would cite things like the names of the saints or different things from the Catholic faith. It was just the way she had of speaking. But then she wrote in this book, which was early in her career, and they had an experiment in Barcelona on teaching religion to children. And it was very Christian. It was very important to her. But I think that later on in her life, she didn't emphasize this as much. And I brought a little quotation.
Sure, read it into the camera here if you want to.
This is from To Educate the Human Potential, which she wrote much later. I think it was 48.
This is after her experience in India then, right?
Yes. Religion and languages keep men apart, while arts, sciences, and products of industry unite them. And religions show little tendency yet to federate, I guess that means to come together, while the thoughtful see yet more danger in deliberately cultivating the irreligious spirit. It requires the influence of sacred and deep things to move the spirit, and the new children of civilized humanity must be given a profound emotion and enthusiasm for the holy cause of humanity. Religion then will not need to be taught, which indeed it cannot really be, but reverence for truth, inner as well as outer, and grow in natural freedom. And the barriers of language will be allowed to give way before economic forces array against them, when better mutual understanding of human purposes prevails. So I think she made a leap there. She went from teaching a specific religion to more seeing religion as being somewhat divisive. And you can't deny that it's divisive because it's caused so many wars.
And bombings, yes.
And, yeah.
Okay, equal time.
Yes, that's a very interesting quote. It's interesting that she talks about language and religion, as comparing them, because that's what I was doing.
Yeah, right.
children have a sensitive period to language. You can't exist in human community without it. So you call it divisive, call it what you want, but it's absolutely essential to life. And I think children also have a sensitive period to the religious life or the spiritual life that that is very important to their well-being. And so both are important, and both have the potential to be divisive. And one of the things I'd like to say, because of that sentence that you just said, is very common of religions are divisive. And I would like to say that religions at their best are not divisive, but religious fervor has been used to divide people or to make people be on my side, to send people into war. And I think that they've been used by very cynical people to do that, and it's not true. It's not religion at its best. It's not true religion. And so, in a sense, religion has been blamed and used, for the divisiveness of greed, and other power, other things that people want. So that would be one thing I would say.
Well, let me just ask, in a spiritually respectful way as I can, don't human beings have this sense to use things for bad reasons? I mean, isn't that part of this? And if we don't take that into account, are we missing something?
You mean using religion for a bad thing?
Right.
Using anything for bad.
Well, yeah,
Right.
anything. Well, I think the founders of the various religions were very fine people, but it was their followers who claimed that they had the truth.
You're talking about Montessori now, or are we talking about religion? Okay, just trying to be clear.
Is that what jumped into your mind?
It can happen.
The followers think, well, we're right, everybody else is wrong, and it brought about this divisiveness, not from the founders so much as from the followers, and it has. In some cases, they're just warring with each other. Even divisiveness among one faith, like the Shiites and the Sunnis are both in Islam, but they're different factions of it. So
But those factions were whipped up by political interests
well,
after we went to war in Iraq. And I have spoken to many Muslims who grew up and said to their mothers, at that time, are we Sunni or Shiite? They didn't even know. That's how immaterial it was until political people said, let's use this to start wedging, start getting power.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying it's very cynical, but common way to use religion is, to divide people. And it's not the people themselves, but leaders, who are vested in this. So.
Okay, I take it you would have different answers to this, and maybe we've been over it, but if Montessori schools were to be places that work on the divisiveness and the misuse of religion and so on, how would you suggest that they proceed? Would you study nature and you study an organized religion, or what would you do?
Well, for example, you mentioned in Nurturing the Spirit, I think, all the iterations of the Golden Rule. From every tradition, so to find things like that and put them in front of children would be a great way to honor religions and use them to unite people rather than divide them.
it's amazing how many different religions have the same basic principles that they're founded on, but and that's a uniting thing, and that's something that should be emphasized more, I believe.
Okay. And less looking back to the foundation of people do the Golden Rule, and more on the Golden Rule in terms of the common good?
Yeah, right.
No.
I found a disagreement here, all right.
It's sort of like saying, my tradition has this rule that's very sacred to it. Your tradition has that too. We have something in common. How wonderful. But remaining in our own traditions, but enjoying, the commonality that we find there, common concerns.
I think that children don't have this divisiveness feeling. When they get it, it's usually from adults. And I remember one time I listened to a TV program with Art Linkletter, who used to interview children, you remember? And he was in Northern Ireland, and he was interviewing this little 4-year-old, beautiful child, big pink cheeks and just sweet. And he was asking her what she liked and what she didn't like. And finally she said, just out of the blue, she said, I hate the Protestants. And he said, you do? He said, oh, what is a Protestant? I don't know. He said, I don't know. You know, it was something she heard from adults. But I don't think that is a natural thing within children.
In the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, which was developed by Sophia Cavalletti, working on the foundation of Montessori, she really paid attention to what are the spiritual characteristics of children, what are the sensitive periods for those. And at 6 to 12, one of the strongest spiritual characteristics is a sense of communion with all of nature and with all people. And when I began to look for this in them, I just realized it was way deeper than my mind could even embrace. Their sense of communion, it was astounding to me. And I've had adults around the country, as I've gone to work at different places to share the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, come up to me and say, how can we help children, to be peaceful and not to hate and not to have prejudices? And I want to say, you have put those prejudices there. This is not natural to children before age 12. It's absolutely not, and they're taught it. And the unity that they have, which is a gift from God, is torn down. And if we would not tear it down, we wouldn't have to rebuild it. So we make a lot of work for ourselves by introducing our prejudices in our communities.
Well, without getting to areas that are beyond my understanding, isn't there some kind of a sensitive period that kids would pick up differences, how they're different from other people, and that the people who are using religion can take advantage of that? Isn't there something there?
Well, certainly the awareness of different religions at age 9 to 12 is present. It's a delight. So I've had Catholic children go to the mosque and say, it's so holy. They love it. They're holy and they recognize the holiness there. So it's not divisive. It's just different. So unity and diversity, which is the theme of next year's conference, is really what we're talking about.
Maybe we should do a workshop here.
I think so.
We'll talk here a little bit about it.
I wanted to say one thing. I mentioned it to you before we started, which was, did Montessori require religious education to complete Montessori program? She always addressed what we call the whole child. Part of the child is their spiritual life. So what does that require us to do? Mm-hmm. And I think what it requires us to do in a non-sectarian setting is exactly what Mom is talking about. But I also think we could turn the question around and say, does religious education, if that's what you're doing, require the Montessori method? And I would like to propose that it does. Because the Montessori method is a way of saying, here's a gift for you. Here are the color tablets. Explore color. And it doesn't say, you must believe, this about color,
Red is the best color.
That's right. And in the same way, when we use the Montessori method to offer religious education, we put these gifts in front of children. We say, here's an image. Here's something God or Jesus said. Here's something we do in our faith. And it's a sign of our relationship with God. Take it to your table, take it to your mat, and enjoy it, and explore it. And we don't tell them what to believe about it. And their ability to explore these signs and find meaning and make meaning for themselves is incredible. But it's not directed by the adult. And it's very different from the religious education experience that both of us had, where the answers were given before we had the question.
Yeah, I don't know. Was your religious education with the Jesuits or with...
No, it was nuns.
Nuns, okay.
And I had 15 years of it, and I was overly, brainwashed maybe.
Okay.
For it. Now, I'm not saying, my religion has meant a lot to me. Certain times, I used to go to retreats, and they were very, very helpful to me, and I enjoyed them, and I think they boosted my spirituality. and marriage encounter and different aspects of religion, which I still treasure. But getting all these answers and saying, this is what you have to believe, I don't think somebody can say to you, this is what you have to believe. Each person knows what they believe. And so that's part that I didn't like.
Well, let me ask you, this is a totally off-track question, but I sort of come to the conclusion over the years that fallen Catholics tend to be the best people. And I don't know, I mean, do you feel any of that you've taken the essence of a religious tradition, but you're applying it in
another way.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean, because I know some people like that.
She's not a fallen Catholic, she's elevated.
Okay, I think most Montessori people would correct me on that. That's probably true.
Oh, really?
She's a superior Catholic.
Well, I still go to church, and I feel there's something more than what we have in everyday life. And I like the mystery of going to church, that they sometimes which you don't get in the secular world, but there is a mystery in life, and we will never find out what the answer is. But I think it's part of living is pursuing it.
Okay, and the mystery you're taking is not that other religions are bad or wrong, it's that there's a universe out there that...
I have great respect for other religions, I really do. I'm sorry I didn't know more people from other religions when I was growing up, because we kind of kept in our own little enclave.
Well, that's kind of what I asked you, is putting religion into the daily life of school preventing kids from really understanding other religions, and you're saying it doesn't have to?
No. It's like if I know English, I'm ready to jump off into another language. If I don't know any language, there's a huge loss. And I think that the same thing can happen with the spiritual life. If you know the language of one religion, its sign, values, and so on, you really are ready, because you understand how to read signs, how to read the signs of another tradition. But if you've never read a religious sign and you haven't been introduced to them, you're not ready to read the religious signs of another tradition. And so it poises you for interfaith education in a very powerful way, to know your own tradition.
Okay. And can it help you read the religion of nature?
Absolutely. I think that embedded in most of the signs of different religious traditions are nature signs. And so Jesus said, for example, the kingdom of God is like a mustard seed. And in the Jewish tradition, they talk about the Jewish people being like a vine. So there's nature signs that are part of these traditions that help.
Okay.
They're built on. We have to build on the material world.
15 minutes. 15.
15. Are there other things that you would like to discuss in terms of spirituality and Maria Montessori's career that we should cover in the 15 minutes we have left here?
Well, I would say that, and I hoped when I wrote the book, Nurturing the Spirit, that it would lead to more discussions of it in school, with the school staff, with different conferences, workshops, that they would explore it more. And I would like to see that happen. I think it's happened to a certain degree, because I get a lot of questions from people that I didn't used to get. And I think that the more we explore it, the more we'll be able to infuse it into the everyday life of the classroom.
Okay. Well, maybe that's a reason to try a workshop, the three of us next time. Or you pick an interviewer you think would be better for the...
You're doing pretty well.
Yeah. You have good questions.
Well, you certainly inspire them. That's it.
In relation to the culture today, people talk a lot about how children are oppressed, children are busy from sun up to sundown, and there's not a lot of space for attentiveness, to the Spirit.
Right.
In our school, we have a room called the atrium, which has those religious materials, and it has a lot of materials for prayer, and it has materials for prayer from all around the world. So how do people pray? You know, they walk a labyrinth, or they use beads of various kinds. And in our school, we have children who are Catholic. We have many Christians of many different denominations. We have some children who can articulate that they are atheists. We have children whose families are Muslim, Christian, or Jewish and Christian. And because we're talking about religion in that atrium, those children can identify. They can say, well, I'm Jewish and this is what I believe. Now, these are conversations that wouldn't normally happen, you know, in the classroom. So there's religious conversations that aren't just about the Christian faith, which is what our school is. So this provides children an opportunity to politely talk about, you don't believe in God? I thought you believed in God, you know, and ask each other about that. What does that mean? And the first time a boy articulated that in front of me, the whole group just looked at him in astonishment, you know, like I thought everybody believed in God. And it was a whole new idea to them that you could not believe in God. And then they had to learn how to handle that politely, you know, and say, oh, you know, rather than what. And so we had a little grace and courtesy about having those conversations. Well, these are life skills, you know, for the world. But even those kids who say, I don't believe in God, come to the atrium. Why? Because it's a quiet space. And they can pick up anything, a journal or some art materials or some beads, and get quiet and attend to their soul, however they perceive that to be. And they do that, which makes me think they need that. And so, and that's partly as a result of the busyness of our everyday life. Children don't get many opportunities for quiet and for tending to their soul.
So true, that children don't have that space for time. And, you know, I think that when we were growing up, one thing I remember, on our third floor, we had a room where we had our toys. It was a playroom. And I used to go up there, and not so much to play with the toys, but to look out the window. And I could look at all the surrounding places, and I could picture what was going on in this house and what these people were doing. And then there was a road that I thought someday I'll be leaving here and going. And it was just thinking, or it was just a perfectly quiet time, and I love that. And I don't think children do anything like that anymore.
Have you seen the film Race to Nowhere?
No.
Have you seen it?
No.
I think it's from a group out of San Francisco, and it's sort of making its way around. It hasn't gotten into theaters, but it's talking about all the pressures on kids to get into the best high schools and best colleges and have the right experiences, and how overwhelmed the kids.
And even service projects are to get on your resume to apply to college.
Right.
That's not the reason for service.
Yeah. Well, now children are using video games. In fact, a woman last night was telling me that she was with a 2-year-old. I think they were on a train or something. The 2-year-old, for 5 hours, played video games. Can you imagine a 2-year-old? And what is this leading to? Why?
Well, it must be dealing with some kind of a sensitive period, though, that a kid that small can understand the workings of.
Well, I presume they were video games for young children.
Well, one thing that sort of comes out of this is it seems like there's a message for teacher educators that they need to attend to the spiritual issues that their students are going to be dealing with in kids. Is that fair to say?
I think so.
Yeah. And I think including in your characteristics of children, include the spiritual characteristics of children, not just the, language, sensitivity for language and so on.
You'd add one to that then, huh?
I'd add several, for each age, because if you look at the characteristics and then focus on the spiritual characteristics, there are strengths and weaknesses, just like there are, or sensitive periods, at every stage.
Okay.
Well, there are 2 ways, I think, that we know God: through the scriptures and through nature. And the scriptures pertain to particular religions, but nature can pertain to everyone. And I think if you really contemplate nature, you see the wonder. You see the wonder of all this. How did it, all the different kinds of flowers, you know, how did this happen? And I really think that one of my many spiritual moments in my life were when I had a new baby. Because I look at this baby and I thought,
That was me.
did this come from me? You know, it's like, it has to be something beyond that. And it was very spiritual time.
Yeah, well, in the current issue of the paper, we have an article by Harvey Hollenberg who talks about we are stardust. You know, it's all the things in the world are just recirculated. And so
he is a great teacher. I've
he's
seen his classes many times.
a very wise man, too.
He is.
So.
He is.
Mom and I both presented at a conference called Child Spirit
Oh, yeah.
several years ago. And this was a non-sectarian group who were attentive to the spiritual life of children. It was very interesting for me to watch them try to articulate the spirituality of children without using any religious language. It's almost impossible. And so the word they had in common was angels. Somehow angels was an acceptable spiritual word, religious word that they imported, but it was very, very difficult to talk about the spiritual life without any religious language at all. Excuse me.
Okay, well, I think this was helpful. I assume that some folks will want to browse through the archives, and I will do a transcript of it and put it into article form and send it to both of you and see what we can do. And she'll get the first step in this issue with her article, and then, sort of everybody in here. Okay.
She's had a few steps, hasn't she?
Well, thank you very much.
Thank
I
you,
really
Denny.
appreciate it.